Today we're going to hear from Natalie and Caroline about using critical race theory to analyze pop culture and literature in order to approach racism in the modern world.
Critical race theory aims to investigate the ways in which race is related to the details of everyday life, especially race, law, and power, and can be applied to analyze literature and pop culture in order to learn more about race and its role in society. Derek Bell is credited as the primary contributor to critical race theory. Many of his writings heavily influenced the theory, including Race, Racism, and American Law, which was published in 1973. Terms that are central to critical race theory are macroaggression, interest convergence, white privilege, and stereotypes. Macroaggression refers to large-scale or overt aggression towards those of a different race, religion, gender, or sexuality. An example would be the Jewish people in the Holocaust. Derek Bell uses interest convergence to explain that racism is common because it overlaps with the interests of a white individual or group. The interest, something that is needed or desired, can be financial or psychological. For example, racism is in the financial interest of the upper-class white people who exploit black laborers by paying them less than their white counterparts. The same situation is in the psychological interest of the working whites because their experience of being underpaid and exploited by wealthy whites creates a need to feel superior to someone else. So, the desire to advance oneself in the material world determines the ways in which the dominant society practices racism. Interest convergence is often considered one of the primary causes, if not the primary cause, of racism by critical race theorists. White privilege refers to the myriad of unearned advantages and benefits granted to members of the dominant race, purely for being a member of the dominant race. They are unearned and not based on merit. For example, the standard flesh-colored band-aids represent the white race. A stereotype is a generalization, usually a widely held and oversimplified idea, or an image of a particular type of person that is often offensive. For example, a stereotype could be that girls are bad at sports.
Chapter 1 of our thesis focused on using critical race theory to analyze the racism present in Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird. We chose To Kill a Mockingbird because we realized that the authors often uses fictitious characters and events informed by their personal experiences to critique social injustice in order to spark a change. Harper Lee draws on her experiences growing up in the southern United States during a time characterized by pronounced racial inequality, to inspire reflection on racism and its disastrous consequences. And even though To Kill a Mockingbird was originally published in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement, an analysis of it offers pertinent advice on how to combat the racism that still infects our society. As a member of the dominant race, Scout unwittingly reaps the benefits of white privilege, best exemplified in her access to a formal education and the respect with which Calpurnia addresses her. Because racism is so ingrained in society and is accepted as part of life in southern Alabama, Scout doesn't think twice about the fact that only white children have an opportunity to go to school. Calpurnia enlightens her to the rarity of Macomb's black residents being able to read. As a privileged member of the Caucasian race, Scout inherited a higher social status than the black residents of Macomb, and a level of respect that automatically attaches to that status. In keeping with this, Calpurnia refers to Scout and Jim as Miss and Mr. respectively. This perverts the typical dynamic that exists, especially in the South, in which children refer to their elders as Mr. and Miss out of respect. So although Calpurnia is the closest thing to a mother the Fitch children have, because she is black, they do not address her with respect. Despite the inherent white privilege and paralleling racism so ingrained in her world and in the minds of the citizens of Macomb, Scout's experiences and her father's example lead her to develop a view on equality purposely unaffected by race. This highlights Lee's argument on the importance of adopting a way of thinking that mirrors Scout's, and it works towards breaking down the inherent white privilege and the cycle of racism that passes from one generation to the next. Two dominant forms of macroaggression present in To Kill a Mockingbird are the widespread use of the N-word to degrade and shame not only one member of the African American population, but the population as a whole, and the universal segregation from the white community that the black community in Macomb experiences. Scout is unaware of the disparaging meaning of the N-word. Atticus teaches his daughter not to use the word that the majority of Macomb uses to spread hate and degrade the black residents. When Calpurnia brings Scout and Jim to her church, her friend Lula becomes upset because each race has their own separate space for worship in Macomb. In bringing Scout and Jim to her church, Calpurnia upsets the semblance of equality that has existed in the colored church, and once again the black community was put beneath the white community. As she matures, Scout comes to realize these macroaggressions for what they are, but in keeping her childlike naivety, simply wants there to be one fold. Scout's unwillingness to differentiate and prejudge based on race stresses the importance of ignoring while at the same time embracing everyone's differences, rather than using them as a basis for discrimination. Lee calls further attention to racial injustice by exposing the financial and psychological superiority that white members of society assert over black members via such measures as exploiting and exclusively employing black people in low and underpaying jobs. Atticus describes Link Dees as the only good farmer in Macomb because he pays fair wages in contrast to the farmers who treat their black laborers as less than human. The working class white citizens of Macomb strive to assert psychological superiority over the black citizens, as Bob Ewell does when he wrongfully asserts that Tom Robinson raped his daughter. Through waking up to the racism that permeates her community for the benefit of her perceived superior race in the form of interest convergence, learning from her father, Scout is able to develop a mature perspective about human equality and social justice that does not favor based on race, which in turn encourages her to adopt a similar way of thinking to break the cycle of racism in society. Racial stereotyping in To Kill a Mockingbird is most present in Tom Robinson's unfair arrest, trial, conviction, and death. Atticus addresses the negative stereotypes that are so ingrained in Macomb's minds during his closing arguments in Tom's case. Tom, terrified and beaten down after the mistreatment he suffered in the hands of the dominant race in Macomb, attempts to escape and is shot and killed. His death is stereotyped as typical of an African American, sudden, unplanned, and Scout comes to realize the racism that affects her community through her father's controversial defense of Tom, and Atticus instills in her the need to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, so to speak. Scout's journey to maturity and To Kill a Mockingbird is surrounded by the ugly racism that infects Macomb and her father's teachings about understanding human differences with dignity, and together they emphasize the point that Lee makes on the importance of understanding human dignity and equality, despite differences, in order to achieve justice.
Chapter 2 of our thesis focused on using critical race theory to analyze a pop culture work, and we chose Kenya Barris's Blackish, because television comedies often tackle complex, current societal conflicts through humorous situations in order to point out the absurdities of issues and effectively spark change. Blackish is an ABC sitcom that follows the Johnson family, an African-American family trying to find their way in the always changing racial dynamic of modern America. In this episode titled Hope, the Johnson family broaches the current issue of police brutality against the African-American community, where racial stereotyping, white privilege, and macroaggression persist, illuminating the episode's goal of using comedy to help eradicate systematic racism by kindling hope in young and old generations alike. Diverging from the modern stereotype that depicts African Americans as unintelligent, poor, and violent, the Johnson family is comprised of an Ivy League educated physician mother, Rainbow, and an advertising executive father named Dre, and 4 children who go to a prestigious private school. The upper middle class family also lives in a predominantly white neighborhood. This perversion is demonstrated when Dre's mother, Ruby, spray paints the words "Black owned" on their garage door to discourage rioters from looting their home, suggesting they need protection and that it is unusual for an African American family to live in such a nice home in an upscale neighborhood. The entire Johnson family further distorts the stereotype of African Americans as violent and uneducated by having a fully fledged, all-in debate about police brutality against African Americans. Rainbow, the mother, plays Lucifer's curly-haired lawyer, while Junior highlights the arguments made by the book by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and Diane recites facts, figures, and statistics. The Johnson family's perversion of the stereotypes that surround their race juxtaposes the depiction of the victims of police brutality on the news. Those African Americans are illustrated as being violent, gun-toting thugs from whom the police need to protect the public. When speaking of hope in the episode, the topic of President Obama's inauguration comes up, and the hope that Dre and the entire African American community had for it, and the fear that that hope would be snatched away. A white president may be targeted for his ideas, failures, or scandals, but never because of the color of his skin. The Johnson family, as well as the entire African American race, have the burden of worrying about the first president representing their race being targeted or assassinated solely because of the color of his skin. The Johnson family also struggles with whether they should educate their younger children on the topic of police brutality and the truth about the society in which they are part of, even if it means ending their innocent childhood. White children are privileged to live comfortable, protected lives without the fear of racial hate that African American children must experience on a daily basis. By contrasting the lives of the Johnson family with the lives of Caucasian families in their community, Blackish viewers can more fully see and understand the consequences of white privilege on African Americans and society as a whole, and will hopefully seek to fix this destructive racial injustice. The topic of discussion and hope is police brutality against the African American community, which is an example of macroaggression. The Johnson family discusses that the issue of police brutality against African Americans is not a new topic, but that the recent advent of social media and 24-hour news is and has made information readily available to the public, stimulating more discussion about the injustice. The Johnson family discusses numerous cases that have taken place in various states around the country, including the actual recent case involving Eric Gardner, educating viewers that police brutality against African Americans is a current injustice. The family discusses details of some cases, including the reason the African American victims were shot, tasered, chased, or pulled over, as well as the excessive force that was inflicted upon them in order to highlight the ridiculousness of the cases of police brutality to viewers. Pops tells Junior that the story of macroaggression is one he has been hearing all of his life, restating that police brutality is not a new issue. In an attempt to slice through the heavy tension and stress caused by the grave topics of police brutality and racism, a bantering battle over takeout menus and whether the family will end up eating Chipotle for dinner yet again plays throughout the episode of Hope. This What's for Dinner battle demonstrates comedy's ability to lighten mood just enough so that the viewers are able to fully relate to and grasp the need to enact change in society.
Literature and pop culture can both be used to analyze social injustice in society, even years after something is written. Our works both emphasize that hope and maintaining an outlook uncorrupted by the craziness that persists in the world are key to promoting social change. Even though Scout, because of her father's job as Tom's lawyer, is exposed to racism and its nasty consequences, they only serve to inspire a message for hope for the future. Hope that we can learn from Scout's innocence and truly adopt her insistence that there is just one kind of folks. Blackish's moving discussion of the current issue of police brutality against the African American community also highlights hope as the way to combat racism. Scout's view on racism as a member of the dominant race and the Johnsons' views as members of the black community combine to give a full view of the issue, and their mutual conclusion that education on the issue and instilling hope as a primary tool for fighting racism point to the importance of adopting the same method to attack the systematic racism that persists in our society. Racism is a topic that has impacted society since its conception and has continued to persist in one form or another since then. In order to establish justice for all, justice independent from race, we need to confront the racism so ingrained in our society and take measures to end the injustice that stems from it. Literature and pop culture are useful in exposing the presence and effects of racism that otherwise may be hidden. We realize that looking to leaders from everyday life is not the only place we should be looking to promote progress. Classic literature remains because its messages transcend the decade in which it was published, and pop culture has a way of changing the real world by relating to its viewers. Together, novels like To Kill a Mockingbird and sitcoms like Blackish reach a wide range of viewers, which allows their message to really reach the world and hopefully inspire change. By analyzing racism from the perspective of both parties, as Scout is a member of the dominant race and the Johnson family members of the oppressed race, we learn the importance of approaching things from all angles. In our academic careers, we will continue to implement this method, analyzing works and situations completely and from all perspectives. There are always two sides to a story, and it is important to realize and evaluate both of them, especially in an academic setting because that is when the full picture comes into view. The message of hope for the future that both To Kill a Mockingbird and Blackish imparted teaches a valuable life lesson in the importance of always striving for a better, whether it be in the race relations of the modern America or just as a person in general. We learn to look at things from the perspective of other people as well, which is crucial in keeping healthy, lasting relationships with others. We really learn the importance of thinking positively. It can be easy to get caught up in the negative things that happen in everyday life, but the message in these works is to keep hope in spite of the difficulties that we encounter. Going forward and learning from our work, we will strive to push for change instead of just accepting things as they are, while keeping a positive attitude and hope that everything will turn out okay.